Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast that you're listening to right now. Thank you so much, called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. It is a daily podcast, 365 days a year, and each day we talk to an author about all of the things related to their career, their book, their life, and more in 30 minutes or less, because who has time? I am now an author myself, although I wasn't when I started this podcast, and you can get my new memoir, Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, wherever books are sold starting July 1st, and my children's book, Princess Charming. You can learn more about me at zibbyowens.com, but really you're here to learn more about the authors, and that is what we're going to do. Also, be sure to check out all the other podcasts in the Zcast Podcast Network. You can learn more at zcastnetwork.com and definitely check out those shows as well. I hope you'll all check out the all-new Zibby Mag, ZIBBY-MAG, the literary lifestyle destination with essays, book news, a lit lifestyle feature, and even some classes. Check it out, zibbymag.com. Josie Silver is the author of One Night on the Island, a novel. Josie is the unashamed romantic who met her husband when she stepped on his foot on his 21st birthday. She lives with him, their 2 young sons, and their cats in a little town in England called Wolverhampton. By the way, she is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of One Day in December and The 2 Lives of Lydia Bird. Welcome, Josie. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss One Night on this Island.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to be here. I apologize. I'm actually in my bedroom. I don't normally do this from my bedroom, but my office in the garden, the neighbours are having work and there's lots of banging. So I thought I'll come up here and hopefully it's going to be quiet.
That's totally fine. I'm in my bedroom too, but nobody needs to know all of this.
You're right. Rewind.
Right? I'm in the corner. Nobody can see. It's fine. Doesn't matter. I almost didn't even get out of my pajama pants, but I did. So anyway, so you are a #1 New York Times bestselling author. You were a Reese's Book Club pick, and now you have a new book out. Before you talk about the new book, I want to know what it's like going from that to having to write another book once you've had such a massively successful experience and then being like, okay, now I'm just going to sit and face the blank page again. What is that like?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think the word is probably terrifying. This is actually my second book since that one. So this one wasn't so bad. But I mean, that was just such a unexpected kind of roller coaster from, it hit the New York Times #1 best-selling spot at Christmas, which was kind of like, all of my Christmases come at once. It was just the most surreal and brilliant kind of experience, for my first Josie book as well. It wasn't actually my first book. I've been writing for more than a decade, but it was my first Josie Silver book. And it was just phenomenal. And then to try and sit down afterwards and think, okay, what's next? It was difficult, but actually I feel so lucky to do this job anyway, because it's kind of my dream job. So it was difficult, but, if someone's paying you to do it, you have to keep your butt in the seat and actually do the job. So, yeah, I mean, I just feel incredibly fortunate, to be honest.
Go back a second to why different pen names, why different branding, how did you get started, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I always wanted to write, but the time was never kind of right in my life. I took an office job that I didn't particularly like, but then, how life happens. I got married, I had kids, and it was only when I was on maternity leave that I thought, I really don't want to go back to that job. I'm going to give it a go. Entered some competitions, and I was lucky enough to place second in a Mills and Boon competition here, Harlequin. And that was sort of the springboard. I ended up not being published by them in the end, but that really did kind of give me I worked with an editor and it gave me a real taste and there was no going back once I kind of started. And then I self-published because it was 2012 and that was kind of just in its infancy. And so I was quite an early adopter with that, and that went really well. And that was more sort of, it was romance, but it was hot romance. It was around the 50 Shades kind of time. And, that was kind of what was being picked up. So I went into that direction under one pseudonym. And then more towards romantic comedy, writing for HarperCollins under the pseudonym Cat French, which did fine and it, bubbled along okay. And then when it came to writing One Day in December, it's just a slight shift more towards serious women's fiction. So it felt like a good time for a bit of a rebrand and just to refresh everything. And I moved from HarperCollins to Penguin. So it was a good point, really, to kind of press the reset button. And it went far better than even I expected it to, and certainly better than the publisher expected it to. And, it just, everything kind of, it was like the stars aligned. So it was like a 10-year amble up to the New York Times. It wasn't, it can look on the outside kind of as a debut and as a, an instant thing. And, how fortunate would that be? But it really was kind of building up to that point for the decade before.
Wow. Okay. So then you wrote One Day in December. Then the next book, that was the Lydia
Bird. That's right.
Okay. Lydia Bird book. Okay.
Which was very different again, more kind of entrenched in grief and recovery. So then, it was kind of such a flip around to write that kind of book from writing a hopeful book with One Day in December to becoming far more. It's a deeper book, Lydia Bird, and it was harder to write by far, with the balancing of the two parallel universes, and it was quite a test to write that one.
Had you been going through grief in your own life? Is that what made you go in that direction?
I'm very fortunate that the answer to that is no. I was lucky to have quite a lot of input from people on forums. I made a lot of friends in that kind of area that had been through difficult stuff, and they were really kind and opened up and shared their experiences. And the thing that kind of stood out to me was that everyone's journey is different. Mm-hmm. So how one person will react is absolutely different and everybody's journey is okay. So moving from that book then to this book now, One Night on the Island, which is kind of a return to the more hopeful, upbeat vibe of One Day in December. It's nice actually to have gone back to that kind of balance of romantic comedy.
And now, this is a long way to get to this question, but why don't you tell audiences what that book is about?
One Night on the Island. Okay, well, that book is about a girl called Cleo who's turning 30 and she's kind of at crisis point. She's reached this, she's a dating journalist, but she's really jaded, and her boss sends her away to an island, an Irish island called Salvation Island. And her mission is to marry herself. That's what she goes for, which kind of sounds comedic. And it is in one sense, but in another way, it's kind of, she's discovering, she needs to kind of strip back down and discover who she is and what makes her tick and what she's really looking for, because she's kind of got into this rut of thinking that she's half a person looking for her other half. And what she really needs to kind of embrace is that she's already whole and that she's on her own. Single doesn't necessarily mean lonely. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of self-empowerment really and self-discovery. And she goes away to this remote Irish island, to this little cabin to do this. And when she gets there, she discovers that someone else has already gone there to do exactly that, to be alone, who is Mac, who is this tall, handsome, very grumpy American photographer who's kind of at an emotional crunch point in his life too, but for very different reasons. So he's just come off the back of a marriage that he considered to be happy, but he's discovered that his wife wasn't happy and they've separated. And he has two little boys who he is absolutely, they're his world. And he's trying to navigate how to be a father without living in the same house. And he has his own issues. Fatherhood's a massive issue for him anyway, because his own relationship with his dad is so complicated. So he's kind of he's at the bottom, he's really in a difficult position. And he's gone there to kind of take a breath, be alone. And the last thing he wants is a roommate. But they find themselves stuck together in this lonely place, and they've both gone to be alone, and the last thing they want is romance. But life happens, doesn't it? And romance kind of finds its way between the cracks if it's going to be there. And they were such a fun couple to write because they're so sparky and so different. I don't know if the old movie, the old Parent Trap movie. Is it Parent Trap?
Yes, yeah.
Parent Trap, isn't it? I love the relationship between the parents in that, and they were kind of in the back of my head when I was writing this book. That funny, sparky, charismatic kind of relationship. So that's kind of the basics of it. But then it's set on Salvation Island, which is my dream island, basically. I looked, obviously it was written during the pandemic, so I couldn't go and visit the remote Irish islands. So I spent lots of time researching and reading and watching videos and all that stuff, and kind of cherry picked all the bits of other islands and created this perfect small island with this eccentric cast of characters that form the perfect backdrop really for Cleo and Mac to get to know each other and to find what they need.
Amazing. I actually listened to part of this on audiobook, which was I love the accents and the whole thing. And it's like so immersive to get into this world. And I also kind of love, I'm 45, but the idea that like, I remember turning 30 and that felt sort of like the end of the world to me at that time. And then turning 40 felt the same way. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, turning 50. So I feel like she's in that moment where it's like, you just can't believe you're about to hit the next decade. And oh my gosh, is it over? What next?
That's exactly the position I'm in personally now. I've just turned 50 and I'm like, oh my God, what has happened? How have I reached this number? And it just, it shouldn't matter, but it just kind of does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It feels a bit seismic. And I think that's the position that she finds herself in, is this, she needs to shake everything up and then see which bits matter and which bits don't.
Yep. Well, I feel like after you graduate from school, there aren't as many milestones. It used to just be all about getting to the next grade. And that was like a way to mark time. But when you're just sort of living, I either mark it by my own kids' ages or big milestone ages for me. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow. Okay.
It's a double whammy here. I turned 50 just a few weeks ago and my son turned 18. So it's kind of, he's at the other end of his journey and I'm like, oh gosh, but being a parent, I think informs so much of definitely of my writing, and parenthood is a big theme of the book. I mean, I've got 2 boys as well. So I guess that kind of came easy.
Yeah. How old are your boys? 18 and what?
18 and coming 16. So yeah, I mean, every age is difficult, isn't it? For different reasons, but this age, it's just the, letting go a little bit age. And that's kind of difficult, the taking, I mean, my eldest is going on his first holiday with his friends in a few weeks. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to cope? It informs your writing, I think, doesn't it? All those feelings kind of come out on the page. And
I have 2 15-year-old. I have 15-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. And then I have 2 little guys, 9 and 7. But with my older son, it's like, he'll be like, all right, I'm going out, right? Like he'll leave the place and I'll be, I'm like, well, check in. And I know it's just the beginning of all of it. But when you see somebody, I don't know, this sounds ridiculous. I know. And so obvious, but just like that, if like I was just 15 2 seconds ago and now he's 15 and going out and doing all these things, what does that say about me? Like where is my life? It's his turn now, right? It's their turn. And I kind of assumed that my parents' life was like whatever it was all about me growing up, right? They were like, if you're at that age, forget it. And now that I'm that age, I'm like, oh man. So
absolutely. I mean, I find it so difficult, but I think especially having been through the pandemic, because, we've had 2 years of being kind of locked in forced proximity, haven't we? Where we've all, not had to worry about them going out and doing stuff. So my eldest in particular kind of went from being 16 and not doing anything to now 18 and wanting the world. And there was none of that little letting out, bit by bit. He's just gone from being a little boy to suddenly being a trainee man and wanting to do everything and wanting us to back off. And that's just, it's life, isn't it? But it's just so difficult. So yeah, I'm finding a glass of wine is really helping at the end of the day at the minute.
Do you feel like the writing helps? Like, do you feel like it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my escape. Absolutely. I had a garden office built just before the pandemic, actually. So I was quite fortunate that I had that put in before anything happened. So I got a sanctuary down there. Because this house, it's noisy and it's all boys. And so I kind of go down the garden, shut the door, and it's like, okay, this is my space. And, it just is a sanctuary, I think. And I absolutely love, I mean, I love writing anyway. I can't believe I actually get paid to do it. So, yeah, I mean, it all goes in, doesn't it? Everything that happens around you kind of comes out on the page in some way. It was the same with the pandemic. My idea with writing One Night on the Island, I didn't want to mention the pandemic. I didn't want it to come onto the page at all, but it kind of still does. It subconsciously, through the forced proximity and not being able to get away from each other, the pandemic definitely informed the story.
Yeah, they're like abandoned, alone. I mean, it's like, and like it's like out of your control. Like they're there for a set period of time. It's like
the weather is against them and the boat is, they just cannot escape the island. So they're kind of stuck.
Yeah, just what happens when life goes one way and suddenly from one minute to the next, it's very, very different and you can't do much about it. I feel like there's that same vibe, right? It's just like this way and now like whisking out of the editorial rooms or whatever of a magazine and like just being, or a wellness site or whatever it was. And then just being like in nature and like, what does it even mean to marry yourself? And, all this stuff. But I feel like there was so much, not pressure, but advice to getting through these hard times of like self-care and doing this. And ultimately, I don't know if it's effective or not, but then the pressure to do that adds on to everything else, right? The pressure for self-care. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe it's just making sense.
And it's all well and good, isn't it? But sometimes I think it's too much, isn't it? And some people's idea of self-care is others' idea, of hell, isn't it? Some people just don't want to do that quiet, calm thing. Some people need that noise and that energy. And everybody has to kind of find their own way. And I think that is very much the theme of the book. Yeah. It's about finding what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I love that you have been into writing romantic comedies or romances forever. And I loved the picture that you posted of the cassette tape because I still have some of my old tapes. I used to listen to like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus on tapes, like in my car commuting to work. And I would put in the cassette and like listen to it back and forth. But that's amazing that you A, did that, and B, saved the tapes.
Do you know what? It's one of my most precious possessions now. I'm so glad that I did, because it kind of, for me, validates me. Do you know what I mean? I did want to do it when I was 14 and I might be 50 now. But, it's been the running theme of my whole life, really, is wanting to do what I do now. And I don't take it for granted at all. I was having my first, well, my eldest is 18, so my youngest is 16. So it's been 15 years that I've been writing kind of. So I was 34, 35 when I started. And, I just sometimes think, gosh, I wish I'd started when I intended to do it, when I was younger. But I think things kind of, life just is life, isn't it? And I don't think I was ready perhaps when I was younger. And, I think if anything, you just got to do it, haven't you? And I wish I had done it earlier, but I'm just glad I did it at all.
Well, maybe it wouldn't have been as good. I mean, you can have the skills, but until you have the experience, it's almost like being a chef and you have like amazing knife skills. But if you're only practicing on like, I don't know, a cucumber, you're not going to make the best meal.
You're absolutely right. I think bringing more life experience to the table definitely helps, kind of with depth, and with just, you have to have your heart broken, I think, to write about it convincingly, don't you? And I've definitely had mine broken a few times.
Yeah, I was wondering, why do you know why you've been so drawn to romance your whole life? Like, do you know where that came from?
I think it came, I mean, my mom is a massive reader of romance. My nan was a massive reader of romance. I've got memories of as a little girl, she had her stack of Mills and Boons next to the television and she'd change them every week at the library and I'd go with her. And, it's been like a running theme through my life. But I just, I'm always drawn to it anyway. I'm drawn to it in movies and I'm drawn to it in books. It kind of just is my thing. I'm just, I've tried to do other things and I can't write dark, thrillery stuff. I had a go and it just wasn't working for me. I think I just love romance and I love love, and it just is about human connection, isn't it? And I think it's just fascinating. So yeah, I can't imagine that I would ever write anything else. Well, I know that I won't.
I feel like it's the same with styles of writing. Like, I feel like I've experimented with so many styles, and I'm like, ooh, maybe I should write this like as like a first, like present tense literary novel. Like, I am in the dark room and I am doing that. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I can do that, but it's just not very good. That's just not that's not like my voice. That's not what I'm into. So I think it takes some confidence or time, or maybe reader feedback, to realize that like maybe what you like doing the most is actually the thing that people might like reading the most.
Yeah, definitely. I think I certainly prefer writing in first person now. I used to write mostly in third, but first, it's so immediate, isn't it? And so kind of in there and immersive. And I think I prefer to read first as well now.
I love first person. I think that's why I like reading memoirs so much. Like I want to hear someone's story. I want someone to tell me a story. Maybe it all goes back to bedtime. It's like bedtime as a kid or something. But in terms of your process, how do you approach books? Like, do you have an outline? Do you know what's going to happen with all of your characters when you set out?
I would love to say yes, but the answer is a scary no. I usually have the beginning in my head and I know roughly where I want them to end, and perhaps a couple of the kind of pivotal scenes that I know I'm going to include somewhere along the way. But then after that, it's very much a case of getting to know them on the job. So, you sit down and write, and they say things and they do things, and you think, oh, okay, that's the kind of person you're going to be. And I find it a really terrifying way to work, but I've tried plotting, and I find it kind of deadens the story for me. Mm-hmm. So I have to kind of write it as it goes, and I write linear, start to finish rather than dotting around, and try and write it quickly. So, I'd rather write 5,000 or 6,000 words a day and stay in the book rather than write here and there and have breaks. If I have breaks, it kind of leaves me. Mm-hmm. So I'd rather sit down for, as many weeks as it takes and just stay in the book and feed everyone cornflakes 3 meals a day. Yeah. And they kind of get it now, and it's chaotic on the outside to look in, but it's just my process, and I've embraced it rather than try and fight it. Yeah, I usually have 3 months of chaos while I'm writing, and then the rest of the year is, the tidying up and the editing and all of that jazz that makes it sparkle.
If you could change something about the publishing industry, what would it be?
Gosh, God, I don't know. I think perhaps to take romance more seriously, and to take women writers more seriously in the industry, and to, romance is kind of the biggest selling genre and the most looked down on. So I think, if anything, it would just be to respect the romance genre more.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, that is our basic human instinct, is love, connection. It is how our species survives, literally. So there is some like evolutionary pull to this, hearing the stories, right? And there's something very soul fulfilling about going through someone's love story and going through the motions and learning from that.
Yeah, it's absolutely it, isn't it? It's humanity, isn't it? And it's the basic connections, but it's family, isn't it? And I love writing about sisters and relationships with family and how they kind of all interact, and the emotional inheritance, I think, is a lot of the theme that I kind of harped back to with this book, was particularly with Mac and his children, about how Mac's experiences had informed his life as a father, and I think that's what's fascinating with people, isn't it? The whole, how everything that's happened to us kind of makes us who we are, and how that impacts our children and the people that we love. And yeah, I think human connection is the thing that kind of pulls me back constantly to writing love stories.
Ironic too, that to write them, you have to withdraw from all human connection to do so.
Don't speak to me. No one speak to me. And to get to the point, don't you, where your characters are your everything, and everything that's going on in their life is massive, and what's happening in your life is kind of secondary.
Yeah.
But that's the fun of the job, isn't it? I wouldn't change it.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. Thanks for the chat and the books and everything. And I wish you all the best. And I hope that your son comes home early.
Me too. Thank you. And congratulations on your success too. It's wonderful to hear. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading your book.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Okay.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.